Today, the world is witnessing a dramatic and dangerous escalation in South Asia, one that has pushed two neighboring countries to the brink of open war. In the last week, Pakistan launched unprecedented airstrikes deep into Afghanistan, including against targets in Kabul, Kandahar, and other provinces. And its defense minister has publicly declared that the two nations are now in open war. Explosions echoed over major Afghan cities. Both sides blamed each other for starting the violent spiral, and conflicting reports about casualties poured in from both capitals. To understand why we are here today and why this matters not just for Pakistan and Afghanistan but for the wider region, we need to go back in time, uncover the roots of this conflict, and explore what might lie ahead. In mid-February 2026, a deadly series of attacks inside Pakistan, including a bombing in Islamabad that killed more than 30 people and wounded dozens, shook the nation and deepened anger among Pakistani leaders and security forces. Pakistani officials said investigators linked this planning and training for the attack to militants operating from Afghan soil. Just days later, on 16 February, militants attacked a security checkpost in Bajaur district near the Afghan border, killing 11 Pakistani security personnel and a young girl. That assault was claimed by the Pakistani Taliban or TTP, a group long active against the Pakistani state and one that Islamabad accuses of operating safe havens across the border. Then on 21st February, another suicide bombing in Pakistan's northwestern province killed two more Pakistani soldiers. These attacks intensified public anger and hardened the resolve of Pakistan's military leadership. In response, on 22nd and 26th February, Pakistan's air forces conducted targeted strikes on what it described as militant camps and hideouts inside eastern Afghanistan, particularly in Nangarhar and Paktika provinces. Striking locations Islamabad said were linked to the TTP and affiliates. Afghanistan's authorities reported at least 18 civilians killed, including women and children, and accused Pakistan of breaching Afghan sovereignty. The situation exploded further when Afghan forces began their own operations along the border, including reported assaults on Pakistani outposts, and both sides traded increasingly fierce combat. By 27 February 2026, Pakistan's Defense Minister Khwaja Asif declared on social media that Pakistan's patience had run out and that the conflict had entered a phase of open war. He accused Afghanistan's Taliban authorities of exporting terrorism and posing a direct security threat. And just hours later, explosions were reported across Kabul as Pakistani forces struck what they call defense locations, marking a level of intensity unseen in decades. The recent violence did not happen in a vacuum. For years, the Afghan-Pakistan border, especially the stretch known as the Durand Line, had been a fault line of mistrust, violence, and competing visions of security. The Durand Line was drawn under British colonial rule more than a century ago. Afghanistan had never fully accepted it, arguing that it divides ethnic Pashtun communities arbitrarily and unfairly. Pakistan insists it is a legitimate international border. This unresolved territorial dispute has been a persistent source of tensions between both neighbors. On top of that, the rise of militant groups in the decades since the US-led invasion of Afghanistan in 2001 complicated relations further. Pakistan's military and intelligence services historically supported some Afghan militant factions during past conflicts, including the Taliban in the 1990s to advance their own strategic goals. But after the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan in 2021, when international forces withdrew and the Taliban reclaimed control of Kabul, Pakistan's influence over the Taliban government became more tenuous. Pakistan hoped that with the Taliban in power, Kabul would act to restrict militant groups like the TTP and curb cross-border terrorism. Instead, Pakistan argues that not enough was done and militants continued to use Afghan territory to launch attacks in Pakistan. This had created a cycle of accusations and retaliations that had been building for years. Periodic skirmishes along the border, artillery exchanges, and sporadic air operations with diplomatic efforts of. At the heart of Pakistan's state rationale for its strikes is a claim that militant groups use Afghan territory as a safe haven to plan, train, and launch attacks into Pakistan. This narrative centers on groups like the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan (TTP) and affiliates, as well as Islamic State Khorasan province faction. Islamabad says these groups have exploited porous borders and weak governance in part of eastern Afghanistan. From Islamabad's perspective, repeated suicide bombings and attacks against its security forces, whether in Bajaur, Bannu, or other areas, demonstrate the militants have not only survived but regrouped across the border. Pakistani officials have pointed to intelligence suggesting foreign fighters and Afghan nationals among militant ranks. But from Kabul's standpoint, the Afghan government rejects these accusations and denies providing safe havens to groups attacking Pakistan. They view the strikes as violations of Afghan sovereignty and argue that militancy inside Pakistan is primarily Pakistan's internal security challenge, one that cannot be simply solved by dictating Afghan policy or sovereignty. This tragic disagreement is not just about violence on the ground, it's about sovereignty, control, and the limits of influence that each state believes it should exert within and beyond its borders. In October 2025, Qatar and Turkey successfully brokered a ceasefire after days of intense clashes along the border. For a moment, it seemed diplomacy might calm the violence, but the truce was fragile. Pakistan demanded sustained actions against militant sanctuaries. Kabul insisted it was committed to peace, but refused to act in a way that would compromise its own sovereignty or political posture. The truce quietly unraveled. Since then, sporadic exchange of fires, artillery duels, and smaller clashes have punctuated the border. Neither side managed to build enough trust to make the ceasefire durable, and with domestic political pressure rising in both capitals, each leap towards confrontation seemed more inevitable. On the surface, this may look like a bilateral conflict between two neighbors, but the implications are much wider. First, the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan is one of the longest in the world, more than 2,600 kilometers of rugged terrain with countless crossing points. Escalations here don't stay local, it affects trade, migration, security operations, and regional stability. Second, both countries are strategically significant. Pakistan has nuclear weapons and is a major US partner in regional security. Afghanistan, under the Taliban government, is a crossroad between South Asia, Central Asia, and the Middle East, with lingering presence of extremist factions. Conflicts here can draw in regional powers like China, Iran, Russia, Gulf states, and others seeking to manage or influence outcomes. The humanitarian toll cannot be ignored. Civilians on both sides have already suffered in cross-border exchanges and airstrikes. Displacements, disputed trade, and refugee movements would increase dramatically, a situation that would strain already fragile communities and create border instability. Looking ahead, there are several scenarios, each with very different implications. International pressure from neighbors like Iran, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Turkey could force a renewed pause. Diplomatic challenges might reopen, perhaps in exchange for concrete commitments to tackle militancy. This would offer a respite and a chance to build confidence measures. Without trust or enforceable agreements, the border regions might remain volatile. Periodic exchange of fire, limited air operations, and continued mutual accusations. This would be a grindingly low-intensity conflict, dangerous but not yet a full-blown war. The most worrying possibility is that the conflict broadens, either due to miscalculations, expanded operations, or involvement of external powers. Pakistan's declaration of open war and targeting of major Afghan cities raise the specter of a conventional interstate conflict, not just skirmishes. This could pull in regional powers, threaten nuclear deterrence dynamics, and create a prolonged humanitarian crisis. What we are witnessing is not just a sudden flare-up, but the culmination of decades of tension. Historical disputes over borders, strategic rivalries over influence, cycles of militancy and retaliation, and repeated failures of diplomacy. This conflict is much about identity and state legitimacy as it is about security and territory. And as the world watches, the stakes could not be higher, not just for Pakistan and Afghanistan, but for a region already grappling with instability, geopolitics, and the lingering shadows of past war. Understanding this conflict requires us to look beyond headlines to see the history, the grievances, the ambitions, and the human cost on both sides. Thank you very much for watching. Please consider supporting us by subscribing to the channel, liking our analysis, and hitting the bell icon. We'll see you in the next video.